Ashraf Gada on SAfm.
Tell you what, wherever you go, I mean, you talk about global politics, and you even reduce it to back home. For example, the strike right now, or the protest by the effectively police services in the Kuruleni region. Then you look at Donald Trump in South Africa. You look at Rwanda and the DRC, and I can go on and on just about in every other region of the world. Of course, Palestine and Israel and so on. But that gets me thinking about just where's the empathy? you know, there's a sense of empathy missing, and understand that it could even be in a workplace, people trying to position themselves to be the people who are right, but in their pursuit of justice, empathy appears to be missing. So let's talk about, the power of empathy, and how we can use empathy as a leadership tool, right? So with me is Mimi Nicklin, who's South African born, founder of Empathy Everywhere. She's also multi-award winning and international best-selling author of Softening the Edge and Empathy at Work. And Mimi is based in Malaysia, but I think speaking to us today from Colombo in Sri Lanka. Mimi, appreciate your time, and thanks for connecting to us here on the National Pulse.
Hello, Ashraf. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Much appreciated. So you've got this big responsibility, based upon my intro, not to go into the nuts and bolts of current affairs issues, but to just give us a sense of, do you get a sense that by and large, empathy is largely missing in all sectors of society, just about everywhere in the world?
Absolutely, Ashraf. And it's not just my sense or my opinion there. It is backed by data. So we have now 3 decades, so 30 years of declining empathy levels at a rate of up to 50%, which is a horrifying statistic when you really understand what empathy is, which is a pro-social evolutionary skill set. So it's a skill set, as you touched on in your intro there, that helps us survive as human race. And therefore, when it's low, you begin to see the segregations that you have touched on. So absolutely, we are in a deficit, and there's never been a time when we needed to fill those gaps more than now.
So 3 decades of decline, that's hugely worrisome. What is empathy? Let's be clear about that.
Yeah, empathy is a skill set, Ashraf. It's a skill set that's built into the prefrontal cortex in your brain. You are born with this capacity. It is the ability to perspective take. So to understand where someone else is coming from, how they see the same environment you do, their experience, their opinion. There is nothing soft about empathy. So for anyone listening in, empathy is not an emotion. It is not the same as sympathy. This is a hard skill set that enables you to connect with other people.
So when people often say empathy means you care, and therefore you're saying a soft skill, when people care too much, they're almost a bit snob. That's really sloppy, and that's not the way it should be, because you lose out when you care too much. You're saying that's not what we're talking about.
That's absolutely not what we're talking about. It is a very common misconception. People think that to be empathetic is to feel or care for people, which is, of course, actually compassion, or it can be sympathy, which are phenomenally powerful emotions. But what we are talking about is a skill set that is used by the likes of the FBI in things like hostage negotiations. You'll find it use in war zones, right, in peacemaking. This is a skill set in terms of your ability to understand other people, to connect with them, to build relationships, to build trust. And what we know from an organizational point of view is that organizations that have empathetic leadership see up to 23% higher profits. So this is really a foundational hard skill, hard to find and hard to maintain, but it has very many hard business results.
So when an organization, and yes, I mean, you're right, an organization could be a business of 100 people, or actually could be an entire country led by a president. When they have these empathetic skills, how does that manifest? How does that play out?
So fundamentally, you're going to find empathy based in listening, right? If the backbone to empathy is curiosity, wanting to understand others, to see their perspective, to understand their point of view, then the process of getting there is through listening. So what I tend to teach is something called listening-led leadership. And what we're teaching organizations all around the world, including here in SA, is how to listen better to each other, to your customers, to your clients, to your teams, and how that leads to fundamentally an improvement in all business indicators, from performance, output, operationalization, but all the way to things like innovation, creativity, and growth. So it is a skill set that organizations can use to build their businesses.
Okay, interesting. You've used the word skill set probably about 7 times in the few minutes we've been talking, which does, would not apologize, which does tell me that a skill set is something that can be acquired, isn't it?
Absolutely, yes. This, like any, as you say, like any skill, really, the more you practice it, the more permanent it becomes. So, in fact, I've just finished my 3rd book, but in my first book, the last 3 words are practice creates permanence. Because with any skill, the more you practice it, the better you become. Empathy is no different. For those people who feel they're not very empathetic, this is something you can learn, it's something you can teach, and it's something you can train.
What about those that, they're not empathetic and they have no desire to be empathetic because they just don't get what you say?
Oh, there's many people like that, Ashraf, around the world, and that's partly why I get up every day to do this work and to fly around the world to help overcome those gaps. There are many gaps, there are many areas of misconception, but the business results, the impact on communication, relationships, and even our longevity. So my new work is really focusing on how this empathy, belonging, connection actually helps you live longer. So people that are chronically lonely, who are disconnected from others, die 8 years earlier statistically. So not only is this good for your business and your relationships, but it might just save your life.
And is there a difference between, individual empathy and group empathy? And I look at it, because many people congregate around groups, whether it's their favorite football club or whether it's a country or a race group, and we often tend to do that anyway. So, is there a difference in terms of how that plays out?
Look, from an evolutionary point of view, we feel safer in groups that are similar to us. That's why we have so many issues with segregation around our world. It is actually from a neurological sort of reality point of view. You are trying to stay alive. That's what the brain is telling you. So yes, it is easier actually to empathize in groups, and it's easier to empathize with groups that you have shared experience with, because of course that makes that imagination, that power of stepping into someone else's world easier for you. But from an individual point of view, there's, I guess, 2 forms of this. There's something called self-empathy, which is your ability to understand yourself, right? To really know what you need to thrive, to be, to grow, to choose in your career or your life. But there's also that one-on-one empathy, which is fundamentally about being in a room or a conversation with someone where you're able to listen to them without judgment and without agreement in search of understanding.
Okay. So lastly, just quick answer. You mentioned from the outset there's this declining trend of empathy like by over the last 30 years, right? So why would that be the case, considering there's so much more awareness about empathy and personal development in the world today?
It's actually a very recent evolution. If I think back just to my own sort of journey in this space, when I started this work in 2018, which was only, 6 years ago or so, the awareness around this was extremely low. When I wrote my first book, I was absolutely alone in this conversation. Now, that has changed. As you said, there is now more awareness, but there is far more confusion than there is alignment. So we're seeing that empathy decline due to many things, politics, social change, urbanization, all kinds of things. In some cities in the world, up to 48% of those cities are living in single-person households. So there's many parts that's pulling us apart. But as you mentioned, the momentum is rising, Ashraf. People are filling the gaps. And there has never been a time when we need that empathy more than right now.
Okay, and a one-line response, just one line, for people listening who are catching on to what you're saying, and they see the lack of empathy as a big challenge. What's the one thing they should do ASAP? Quick answer.
The one thing they should do ASAP is hone their listening skills, because it will probably change your life.
Okay, that's where we're going to leave it. It'll probably change your life. Let me appreciate your time. Lots to consider based on that conversation with Mimi Nicklin.
Whether it is a CCMA referral, problem